Welcome, everyone, to Three Righteous Mamas. We are a podcast that's on a mission to transform our country. We tell the stories that matter, celebrate the power and hope of pissed off mamas who are building a better future for all our children. Hi, I'm Cristina Sensun Ramirez.
I'm Muna Husseini.
Hi, I'm Martha Pincox.
So we're really excited about the show we have today with Beto O'Rourke, talking about the role of money in politics and special interests and how we get big money and special interests to not have the massive say that it has over our democracy, so we can tackle the things that matter to our families and our little people. I want to remind people to please subscribe and tell us what you think about Three Righteous Mamas. Give us a review and let a friend or family member know about us as well. So I want to ask y'all, Muna, you have balloons behind you, birthday balloons. I know they're not yours. I want to know what you're doing for kids' birthdays, because Santi's is next week. And I was like Googling stuff, and some of the stuff sounds really boring during COVID. So I want to know what you did to spice it up. And I'm going to we can share strategies here. And Martha, what you've done as well.
We've been through a couple now.
So for those of y'all listening and not watching on YouTube, I've got probably 15 helium balloons here behind me. You can't see all of them. And y'all, these are just this bundle. There's more in the house because we are social distancing pretty hard. We're not doing any birthday parties with people. So we had to jazz up the house, and there were balloons everywhere, ribbons. There were things hanging from our lights. I mean, my child, he woke up at 5:30 in the morning and went to the living room and came back, Mommy, there's balloons. I just wanted him to have fun. I wanted him to be excited. He didn't even have a party. He didn't even have a cake, y'all.
Okay, that I think is a sin. You got to draw a line somewhere. Balloons do not cover cake ever.
So in my defense, that was the fun day at home. And then we're going to go see our grandparents and then do a little cake with the family. And so there will be a cake. And the way we explained it to him was today is birthday at home. And when we see grandparents, we'll do a cake with them, and then we might do socially distanced birthday with our neighbors on the street. I did this thing where I think I posted it on Facebook. I can share with y'all, but we live on a cul-de-sac. Mm-hmm. And so we were going to chalk up the whole entire cul-de-sac with activities. I did this one, I think it was March 24th when, everybody was stuck at home in isolation. And it was fun because I would watch all our anyone who walked down our street would then do the hop here, turn here, crawl like a bunny, whatever, weird activities. So we were going to do that on the cul-de-sac and maybe have a socially distanced birthday party like that. So
that's cool.
Cute.
At least it's something.
At least building, you're bringing the community in. I love that.
Yeah. What have you done, Martha, since you've got two? I need the advice
so
here.
For Rivers, we were on a road trip, so that was pretty special. And that we didn't kind of need to do anything other than be on the road trip. For Townsies, she turned 7 in November, and we borrowed a projector from some friends and put up a big screen. We didn't tell her about any of this, but we put up a screen in our backyard, and she got to pick the movie, and we made this big, huge pallet in our backyard where we all laid down, and we had P. Terry's on the blanket and watched some terrible movie about corgis. But she had a blast, and my parents came over and sat, got to be socially distant, and we have a neighbor kid that they see who came and watched. But that was what we did, and it was actually really sweet, and she was totally blown away by oh my God, suddenly there's a theater in our backyard. So that's what we did.
Well, I mean, fun. The stuff I have planned, this is giving me some good ideas from both of you. I mean, balloons, Santi's obsessed with balloons. So that was obviously on the list. But my friend has a horse. It's very nice. And I called him up and I asked if he used to have a pony. But he doesn't have the pony anymore, but he still has the horse. So we're going to drive out to his house in Lockhart, and Santi's going to get to ride the horse with me because it's a friendly horse, which is going to be fun. And Santi flew a kite for the first time at the park the other day. So we're going to go fly a kite, socially distance safe.
Oh.
And I let him pick out the cake he wants, which is like those really cool new ones that have the like sprinkles and candy inside the middle, and you cut it and it all comes like falling out.
Inside.
Since you haven't gotten
I think those are so awesome.
You might want to take some notes here on this cool cake. So, kids love it.
Okay, I don't totally suck. I also did a little scavenger hunt at home, and like with each clue, there was like a treat involved, and so like I am not
that's a lot.
crazy boring
that's a lot.
mom. Okay,
that's a lot. That's not crazy boring.
A lot of work.
She's feeling judged about the cake. Okay, Muna, I was just joking. And then the last thing, I actually forgot to do this last year because of everything with the Senate.
Oh, you know, the cake kind of goes with the birthday, so
yeah, it's coming. But the last thing I want to do it last year, but I ran out of time because life was too crazy with the Senate race. But this is a tradition I wanted to start with Santi, which is that every year I write him a really long letter about what I feel about him and how he's growing, and like what I hope for him and what's going on in that moment in his life. And so he'll get one every birthday for now, not his whole life. I wish I'd done it since he was 1 and 2, but he'll get one from here on out is my goal. That's like one of his birthday traditions. And he's totally not going to understand it now.
That is very
appreciate
sweet.
it later. Later he's going to be like, thanks, Mom.
100%.
You should add a video to that letter.
Okay, now you assume a lot of like technological skill, Muna. I'm gonna need
Girl, just hold up your phone. Video.
Video. I thought you meant like a collage video of a montage.
Oh, I'm not that cool either.
Like, fancy. My wife has taken a picture of our kids every other week since they were like able to stand up. Wow. And so when they're 18, she's gonna thread them all together and do like we'll watch them grow up again.
Oh my God, that is so cute. Or you can do it in reverse.
Yeah, you could do it in reverse. Yeah, but
rewind.
She's so committed to it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I'm so excited to dig in on this conversation. Let's get started talking to Beto.
Let's jump in. So, y'all, we are excited to let y'all know that we are joined by Robert Francis O'Rourke, more affectionately known as Beto here in Texas, like this t-shirt I'm wearing. Beto represented the 16th District House Congressional District here in Texas, based out of El Paso, and came into the limelight when he ran for Senate and more recently president. He is also husband to Amy. Please tell Amy we said hello. And thank you so much for joining us, Beto. We're excited to chat with you today about talking about taking back democracy from the influence of money and special interests. So we always like to ask our guests and start with the same question. Please tell us about a maternal figure, mother figure in your life who helped shape how you engage with the world in this amazing and necessary work that you're doing.
It'd have to be my mom, who, it's interesting, for most of her life, she's been a Republican. And for all of my life, I've been a Democrat. So, what's the connection? But she's just such an honest, ethical person and so believes in there being a level playing field. And I think is very aspirational in terms of what she thinks we should be able to achieve individually, what she wanted for her kids and the expectations that she set, and then what she expects from us as a country. And I would think, Muna, that is in some part to explain the reason that she's a Democrat today, having been a Republican her entire life. It just it just couldn't hold any longer. Her values and what she was seeing from today's Republican Party, or certainly those who hold positions of power and public trust, and not just Donald Trump, but those who've enabled him and are complicit in his crimes. And so I think, she sets the tone for me. Obviously did when I was a kid, but does today. And you'll never, if your moms are like my mom, you'll never perhaps fully meet their expectations and, you know, satisfy what they hoped for you in life, but you never stop trying to please them, and also in some way I hope to emulate them. And in my case, I very much want to emulate my mom, who just is just a truly good human being. And again, I wouldn't always describe myself that way in every action, everything that I've done, but I've never stopped trying to live up to that standard. So it would have to be my mom.
And what is mom's name?
Melissa Martha Williams, who, great name. She grew up in El Paso.
For people that are listening, Martha just gave the solidarity fist automatically,
Yes.
like a reflective reflexive reaction when her name was called out. Go on.
Yeah, Melissa Martha Williams, born in El Paso, Texas, to a father from Georgia named Robert Lee Williams Jr., after whom I'm named, and her mother, Charlotte Brooks, who is from Wisconsin. So Georgia and Wisconsin come together in Albuquerque via the Air Force. My grandfather was a navigator in the bombers in World War II and in Korea, and then moved down to El Paso. And that grandmother of mine, Charlotte, started a furniture store in 1951 in El Paso. And, you know, it was really kind of extraordinary at the time for a woman to start a business, I guess, anywhere, but in El Paso. And it was a successful business, and my mom grew up in it and ultimately ended up running it and raised me, my sisters, Charlotte and Aaron, and just provided an extraordinary role model for all of us.
So we're really excited to talk to you about a subject that is woven through every topic we've talked about already on this show. But, you know, we just had an insurrection at the Capitol, and everybody's saying we need to take back our democracy. But one of the ways we also have to take back our democracy is talking about the influence of money in politics. And I wanted to actually start out with, you were a congressman and you went through kind of what people go through where they're doing the fundraising, and you then chose not to do it at a certain point. But I want you to walk us through what the average sitting congressman or congresswoman is forced to do in the current structure and how they end up spending a lot of their time.
Yeah. I remember the first day of orientation from my party. And so I'm in a meeting with the, might have been the, minority leader, Nancy Pelosi, and, the guy who was in charge of the DCCC, winning back the majority in the House. And he lined out what we were supposed to do over the course of a given day. And so you go to a political action committee fundraising breakfast as the first thing that you do. Then you go to your committee hearings, which is your official job. Then you might have lunch with a prospective donor. Then you go back and vote on the floor of the House. Then you go to call time, where for the next 2 or 3 hours, all you're doing is calling rich people. And then more likely than not, you're calling the people responsible for the giving at these political action committees or PACs. And very often, those political action committees have, business pending before your committee of jurisdiction. So if you're on the Armed Services Committee, you might find yourself calling Boeing or Raytheon or Northrop Grumman, all these big defense manufacturing firms from whom the United States purchases, billions of dollars in equipment and weapons and technology. If you're on the Ways and Means Committee, which writes tax policy for this country, you're going to be on the phone with those who are seeking carve-outs in tax policy or shelters or loopholes. In other words, you are placing yourself in a compromised position as you talk to these people who may want to give you money, but might want to give you money because they want access to you, to your thinking, potentially to the way that you vote, to the legislation that you introduce, and to the work that you do as a member of Congress, ostensibly representing 750,000 people, one of 435 members, but in reality, also put into a position where you might think about representing those who can give you money and cut these checks. After you do that, you might do some more official work. And in the evenings, you're expected to hobnob with, again, lobbyists, people who run these PACs and other potential donors. And when you looked at the amount of time that was broken out for you as a freshman member of Congress, the majority of it was spent raising money. The minority of it was spent actually gaining subject matter expertise in the work that you'd be doing, getting to know the members with whom you'd be working, figuring out where the bathroom is, learning the ropes. All that jazz takes second seat to raising the money, and money not just for your own reelection, money that you're expected to raise. I think the minimum was $250,000 that you dump back into the coffers of your political party as they seek to elect more Democrats and defeat more Republicans and keep existing Democrats in office. And the aims are ones with which I agree, right? I want to see Democrats as a majority. I'd like to see fewer Republicans there. I'd like to see a very progressive agenda realized. And yet the means to get there are just absolutely unholy at best. And at worst, and in reality, it's a form of legalized corruption. It's legal. Nothing that we did was illegal. Nothing that any member of Congress is doing on both sides, because Republicans and Democrats are doing this stuff. But it is wrong. And Christina, I think you mentioned the insurrection and the coup attempt on January 6, 2021. And some may see this as distinct from what we're talking about. Those folks were trying to violently overthrow our government by hanging the vice president and killing members of Congress and trying to overthrow violently a lawfully, peacefully, legitimately decided election. But many of them, and many millions other Americans, are no longer able to have any faith in our government because of the dynamic that I'm just describing. It doesn't justify or excuse or in any way make okay what they did, but it might help explain how so many tens of millions of our fellow Americans voted for a guy in 2016 who promised to drain the swamp, who said the system was rigged, who acknowledged something that was true for many of our fellow Americans, which is these people in DC do not work for you. They work for their donors. They work for the people who can cut the checks. They work for those who have been able to purchase access. And I think a lot of that was true. Donald Trump very often asked the right questions or hinted at what was wrong in the country. It's just that his prescriptions to solve this stuff was just so wrong and sometimes just downright evil. So, Christina, that was my experience at the outset. Was your job here, Beto, is nothing more than to raise money. Luckily, within that first term of the 3 terms that I spent in Congress, I took myself out of that system and out of that game, stopped taking money from PACs, stopped doing call time stuff, and just was able to focus on my job. And so that's the uncomfortable, ugly reality of what so many otherwise good people are doing in Congress up through to this day.
Just hearing you describe the way that you had to spend the days, it does connect to the dissatisfaction and the disconnection from the people to our representatives, right? Like it makes sense. I moved to DC immediately after I graduated from college, and I actually worked for the National Automobile Dealers Association. And I had gone there thinking, I'm going to run for office. I love this country. I want to do big things. And what I watched in my time there depressed me maybe more than anything I've ever witnessed other than that. But it was just a revolving door of favors that often harmed our future. And so like I watched them reject cafe standards that could have increased our gas mileage by 10, 15 miles. We had the technology for it then, but we didn't have the political will to deliver it because we had paid for, by a combination of special interests, the outcome to keep cafe standards where they are, to keep miles per gallon where they are. So we kept our dependency on fuel. And I got so sick that I couldn't get away from the town fast enough. And that was 21 years ago. I think something that that it's important for people to understand is that it felt like Trump came out of nowhere and that he was a total surprise. But he is the result of years of investment and coordinated building by the Republican Party, and he was the end result of 40 years of strategy and billions of dollars poured into this. And so can you like blow that out for us a little bit? Because I know that you're thoughtful about these things.
Absolutely. So Martha, I agree with you in terms of the Republican Party's contribution to the underlying causes that produced Donald Trump. The dog whistles and then the sometimes just explicit racism that preceded Donald Trump. You had Stephen King in Iowa, for example. Not Stephen King. What's the Congress?
That guy.
Yeah, that guy. Steve King, who talked about dreamers being drug mules. He said, look at the size of their calves. They're as big as cantaloupes. These guys, they're not scholars. They're not doing great stuff for our country. They're coming here to sell drugs. Total lie, not in any way true, but definitely sets the ground for Donald Trump to come in and say, Mexico's not sending their best. They're sending rapists and criminals and people coming to get us. So there's that GOP part of it. But the other underlying rot that allowed Trump to emerge in 2016 was really bipartisan in its creation. You mentioned the CAFE standards or other meaningful steps we could have taken to reduce the threat of climate change. Democrats, as well as Republicans, failed to take action when they held power. It's the same with guns. Democrats were in positions of control in majority leadership after horrific school shootings or rise in gun violence, and they failed to take action. Here's my theory. It's not that Democrats or Republicans want to see children die from gun violence. It's not even that they love guns. It's just that they love money and getting reelected more than they love taking care of kids or making thoughtful policy on climate or doing the right thing. It's that they were elected into a compromised position from which they had neither the courage or maybe the ability to extricate themselves. And it gets you to this place. There is not just a poor criticism on the process or making anyone feel like the sky is falling without anything for us to do about it. There are some really amazing immediate opportunities for us. The bill chosen as the primary bill for the House of Representatives, H.R. 1 for the People Act, completely reforms our system of campaign finance, automatic voter registration, same-day voter registration, all of the campaign finance and election voter suppression and voter intimidation issues that we really care about, especially in Texas, are addressed in this. It's been paired with the Senate bill S1. It's one of the few times the lead House bill and the lead Senate bill are on the same underlying piece of legislation, and it is supported by the Biden administration. The trick, as you probably know, is that it's very unlikely to pass muster against a filibuster where you need 60 votes plus. And so the test will be, can a majority of Democrats agree to change the rules on the filibuster? You only need 50 plus 1 to do that. And allow something like H.R. 1, SB 1, the For the People Act to pass. That's how you get out of this. And I love the way you're connecting it, Martha, not just to, isn't it disgusting that they're taking all this money and spending all their time calling donors, but they do that and we don't get action on climate. We don't get comprehensive immigration reform. We don't get anything done functionally about the kids in cages. It just all stays the same or gets worse because we're tied to a system that doesn't work. This HR 1, S1 completely rewrites so much of that system for the better. And then I think you get progress on all of these issues.
Totally.
Women of color are leaders in driving political progress. From Wonder Media Network, the Brown Girl's Guide to Politics is the one-stop shop for women of color who want to hear and talk about the world of politics. Each week, host Ashanti Goler speaks with women of color who are organizers, activists, politicians, and more. who are all pushing for progress. This season, Ashanti is dissecting the Biden-Harris administration's first 100 days, its plans to confront a pandemic, an economic crisis, racial justice, and climate change. Tune in to hear from experts on how the new administration's plan will impact BIPOC communities. Listen and subscribe to the Brown Girl's Guide to Politics, wherever you get your podcasts.
So I'm going to take a little bit of a personal turn here, Beto, and there's a question in here, but I'm going to also share two stories, so just stay with me, right?
Yeah, you got it.
I remember the first time I heard you speak here in Austin, and for me...
That's when we met, by the way, Muna. Sorry.
Yes, actually, I feel like the three of us meeting had a little bit to do with you as well, Beto, so a little backstory there. But I remember hearing you speak, and I remember being shocked because you actually mentioned Muslim people. You talked about so many different underrepresented groups, but for me to see myself, I remember being in tears. And then I even remember going and finding Amy, and I chatted with her for 30 minutes, and I was crying because I kept thinking this was in such contrast to so many of the hateful and bigoted remarks I've heard Senator Cruz say, not just about Muslims, but several groups, and having some hope that, okay, maybe someone here is running that is going to care about me and care about my family and care about all of the people that aren't the special interests or the people who have money. And I hit the campaign trail with you. Like, I think I signed up that day and I was just like, what can I do? How can I help? And like this shirt I'm wearing, I have so many of them. So here's second story. My family and I drove to Colorado a month ago over Christmas, and we stopped in this little town outside of Austin in Goldthwaite, and everyone went to go pee. And then my husband came right back out and was like, you can't go inside. And I was like, what? I have to go to the bathroom. He was like, nope, not happening. You know, the looks that they had gotten, you know, everybody in the store was wearing a Trump shirt, like not even exaggerating. I think the bathrooms had signs that said like only girls, no exceptions, only boys, no exceptions. And then my husband was like, you with your scarf on, you just can't go inside. And I remember just being floored because I was like, gosh, we just hit the road. Like, we're starting vacation. I don't want this. I don't want to be thinking about this the whole time I'm on vacation, that I can't be safe. And then later, my sister was like, well, you don't know if it's your hijab. You were wearing a big old Beto shirt. You don't know what they were upset about, which, you know, I choose to laugh about it because otherwise it makes me cry. But back to the point, and the statement that you just said earlier is we have this sort of system, people are elected into it in a compromised position where perhaps they don't have the courage to stand up or try to change the process. And I really feel like you care, and you make it seem so personal that you're trying to make a difference. What is it that makes you have that courage or want to change the system more so than your peers who are in the same system? Like, what do you attribute that to? I'm just curious about your motivation.
I don't know. Maybe it gets back to that question you asked at the outset in terms of a maternal figure that, you know, has had an impact on me in my life. And I told you a little bit about my mom, but I was born and raised Catholic, and the part of my Catholic education, you know, in CCD classes and at church and at mass and in confirmation classes that sticks with me is the justice part of that, of you know, just this deep desire and drive to see everyone treated fairly and to see the best in everyone, and to not see anyone as inherently better than anyone else. And, you know, my mom, who's very Catholic, and probably her lasting you know, shame or disappointment with me is that I no longer regularly go to mass, and, you know, and I have my own challenges with the Catholic Church, which maybe, you know, other folks may or may not have. But she sent me this note at one point. I may have been when I was running for Senate, and she just said, "Beto, remember that Jesus was not with the power brokers. He wasn't with the rich and the powerful. He wasn't even with the priests. He was with everyone who was outcast, everyone who was thought less than. He was with the people that just were not given a chance, and in fact had already, in some cases, died. And at the beginning, that religion was one of outsiders. And Moon, I don't know why I turned to religion while I was thinking about this, but I'm trying to get down to the most honest roots of where that comes from. Probably growing up and feeling like a little bit of a weirdo myself, and a little bit of a strange, kid in high school. I didn't really fit into any group. And, I probably at some point need to connect with Christina on this, because I know she has this punk rock connection in her background, but going to punk shows and being with all the other weirdos who didn't fit in, and suddenly finding that I was in a community. All this stuff was foundational for me, just, CCD classes to punk rock shows to my political heroes, including Robert Kennedy, who just, again, I think, especially in that 1968 campaign, he was going to the unlikely places and speaking with and listening to the unrepresented people. And man, that made just such a powerful impression on me. And I think if you're going to be involved in government and holding political office or pursuing it as a candidate, why the hell else would you be doing this? I mean, what like, do rich people need to get richer? Do advantaged people need more advantages? You should be there to try to set this thing level if you can. And you should especially be calling out to and being with and reflecting in what you say those who've never been or rarely are part of the conversation. So I don't know, that some part of that's always been with me, and I wish I had a better answer for you for why that is. And I kind of bounced all over the board there, but yeah, that's very much how I see things. And one other thing, Muna, I was in Goldthwaite, as you can probably imagine, in the campaign. And we held a town hall meeting there. I don't think it was at the place that you were at or that your husband went into. It was a Mexican restaurant that had opened literally the week before. And I can't remember, I think the couple had lived in Michoacan and had come to Texas. And when they came to Texas, they could have gone to Austin or San Antonio or Houston, and they went to Goldthwaite, and they poured whatever modest savings they had into rehabbing a building there, opening a new business, hiring people in the community, serving amazing food, and hosting, this congressman from El Paso and the 11 people who came to hear him in Goldthwaite that day. But for me, Muna, that made the argument on immigration. This small town that is probably losing people and losing investment. These immigrants came here and they bet the farm literally on Goldthwaite, even if there's intolerance there, right? And it sounds like there is from the experience that you had. They believe in Texas. They believe in America, sometimes more than America, and Texas believes in them. And they make us better and stronger by their presence, even in Goldthwaite, which is where I had that experience. But great question. Thanks for asking.
Can you guys hear my son screaming? I just want to check. You can? Okay.
Absolutely.
I was like, I want to make sure that I'm hoping you can't hear, but okay, wait,
it's Three Righteous Mama.
That's right. It's always helpful when a child's screaming in the background. I did tell Beto that I was nervous on the camp. You can hear that, okay? That I was nervous on the campaign trail. I said, they were nervous about you because you were part of a punk band, and they said you ate tofu, and I said, and I'm vegan, and I was the lead singer in an all-girl punk band, and sometimes our flyers said 100% dick free on them.
That's great.
But I wanted to ask, he's one of the people that I love the most that talks about the intersection of money and politics and democracy is Robert Reich, former Secretary of Labor. And what I love about him is that he talks about, look, this isn't an issue that's about left versus right. It's about oligarchy versus the American people, and their ability to influence who gets elected, what gets on the agenda, and ultimately what gets decided. And it was so exciting. Your campaign, Bernie Sanders' campaigns, numerous people's campaigns that said, no, I want to be funded by the people I want to represent. And there's a growing movement of individual candidates that aren't accepting corporate PAC money. But ultimately, we know we can't just leave it up to the goodwill of individual candidates to figure this out. So how do you believe we get money out of politics, right? We're talking about big money out of politics, so that it isn't who knows the greatest number of rich people, but whose ideas are actually best that gets them elected. Is it overturning Citizens United? Is it a constitutional amendment? How do you feel about moving towards publicly financed elections? That's my ultimate dream, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on actually at the end of the day, how would we fix this, you believe?
Yeah, another great thinker on this is Lawrence Lessig, and he talks about there being essentially two elections that take place. There's the money election, and then there's the political or voting ballot election. And he says that you can't really get to the second one until you win the first one. And to win the first one, raising money, to your point, Christina, you find yourself not necessarily in the company of, a broad cross section of the constituency that you want to represent. You find yourself spending time with the people who can underwrite your campaign, and you're listening to them and reflecting their issues in what you say on the campaign trail. And once in office, looking forward to your reelection, you want to make sure that they are happy, present company excluded, right? But I think that's essentially how this thing works, and how even before you get to the election where you see that person's name on the ballot, there was kind of a secret money election to determine whether that person would even have the chance to stand for election. And so the question is, what do we do about this? I mentioned HR 1 S1 for the People Act. There is a public financing aspect to this that would allow those who don't want to spend time with corporate PACs or any PAC really, or wealthy people, and just want to make sure that they're connecting with the voters who will decide the outcome of that election. They want to make sure, to Muna's question, that they don't feel a political price to listening to and reflecting the interests of those who have not been at the table with money or influence or power in the past. And I think if we can get that passed, signed into law, that goes a long way towards leveling the playing field and beginning to get big money out. But the campaign that we all ran together in 2017 and 2018, and Muna, you mentioned signing up on that day and then just getting after it. I was like that too in some ways. And in other words, I might have been the candidate, but I think all of us were just doing everything that we possibly could. And what felt so good is we knew that there was no premium or privilege offered to anyone based on money, because we weren't taking PAC money. We weren't doing the really big dollar stuff. We were raising a lot of money from a lot of people in really small amounts, and we didn't win. We got close. We helped all of us bring a lot of other candidates through, though, and I think we also helped to change the system in some way. You immediately saw Democrats either in the Senate or running for Senate, some of whom would later run for presidency, saying, I don't want to take PAC money anymore. And I think in part because they saw that you could do the right thing on principle and then still be competitive. I mean, we raised almost $80 million without PAC. So, Christine, I think in answer to your question, part of it is success will breed, those who will emulate that model. And then, but legislatively, and in order to really set that playing field right, I do think you need the kind of disclosure laws, public financing mechanisms, and ultimately, to the point you made earlier, I think you need to see a constitutional amendment that would no longer equate a corporation with citizenship or money with speech, and allow corporations to spend unlimited amounts of money to influence or purchase the outcomes of elections or legislative debates. I really think it's not an academic or an esoteric thing for us to debate or decide. I think if we don't figure this thing out, what you saw with Trump will only be a preview to the much worse unraveling of our democracy going forward, because it's just being sold to the highest bidder in so many instances now. And the average person in this country who is smarter than the politicians give them credit for being, they know that they don't have that kind of access and that kind of say, and that government in many aspects is not working for them. So this is really critical. And my hope is that within the next 2 years, we get the reform to the filibuster, get this passed, and get it signed into law. I heard someone, and I think it's, I'm blanking on her name, who started Run for Something. Is it Amanda Littman, who said something to the effect of, look, most people in the country may or may not know what the hell a filibuster is, but they will know if after 2 years of having Democrats in control of the House, the Senate, and the White House, they don't do anything to meaningfully improve our lives. And if we find ourselves in that position in October of 2022, then by November of that year, I promise you we will lose majorities in both those chambers. And there will be an impeachment trial for Joe Biden starting in the first quarter of 2023. So this is, in order to get any of the big things we want to get done, we gotta pass this reform. And in order for Democrats to be able to continue to hold power, to do great things for this country, we got to get this done. So I think your question and your focus on this as a candidate, now as a host, and as somebody who's helped to mobilize so many young people in this state through JOLT and other efforts, I think all of this work now is coming to a head, and it's really make or break for democracy in the next 2 years. And as you all know, some would argue the next 100 days, because after that, it becomes very, very hard for members of Congress and for the administration to focus on anything other than the midterm elections. So, no pressure, folks, but this is the time for us to make this happen.
Yeah, and so much of what you're talking about is keeping people believing in democracy, and that ultimately what people want to see is the outcomes. They may not know all the rules and the regulations and how congressional leaders spend their time, or state representatives, but they sure know what the outcome for their children. So, we're in Texas. I know we have listeners in different parts of the country, but if you're not from Texas, or maybe you don't know even if you are from Texas, that we have no campaign limits, contribution limits for people running in statewide elections. And, it's helped result in an outcome of having one party rule for the last 25 years in our state. And even though the majority of Texans, if you survey them, support raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, they support moving Texas into a renewable energy economy. And the vast majority of Texans support legalizing marijuana. We don't see that on the agenda, really, and we don't see it moving forward because our legislators, again, feel more beholden to a few mega wealthy donors instead of the vast majority of the people of Texas. So how do we continue to push forward on these issues that we know people care about? There's numerous other issues, and keep people believing in democracy, given the state of the failings of democracy, and it impacts both sides of the aisle, right? Like, the truth is that there are some Democrats that are largely, some of their biggest contributors come from oil and gas, and they're not leading in the right way on climate policy in this state, and could be creating hundreds of thousands of good green jobs, but are doing the bidding of the oil and gas industry. So I want to just say it's just the Republicans, because it is also our side, and we need to honor that it is, because it's how the rules are set up. So, how do we keep people believing in democracy given all of these challenges and everything, like you said, that is at stake in this moment?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is going to be up to local leaders. I think about Lena Hidalgo in Harris County, she has, I believe, more people that she's responsible for in Harris County than exist in the entire state of Nevada, or maybe 25 other states. Just 5 million people. It's a lot of people. And she's doing such an amazing job with the purview that she has when it comes to COVID, and that county's response, even though at every turn she's being undermined by the governor, who mocks her mask mandate before realizing that he has to adopt one statewide because so many people are getting sick and dying so quickly in the state of Texas. He's tried to keep her from stay-at-home orders that would save the people in that community in a state that's lost, I think now more than 35,000 people. She's also, Christina, invested, and I know you all know this, but she's invested very heavily in democracy. She invested, and the commissioner's court with her, and Chris Hollins, who was the county clerk during the elections, in drive-through voting, 24-hour voting, voter super centers, ballot tracking applications. And all of these things restore or keep people's faith in democracy at a time that the governor's limiting absentee ballot drop-off locations to 1 per county, which means in Harris County, you might be driving 50 miles to get to, and you may just say, forget it. I'm not going to go through the hassle, which is exactly what he wants you to do. At a time that you have Donald Trump and Ken Paxton and really the constellation of elected Republican leadership trying to undermine your faith in free and fair elections, you have a local leader like Lena restoring that faith. And I think that has a lot to do with the record turnout that we saw across Texas. Clay Jenkins is doing that in Dallas County. Andy Brown just got in Travis County. So here are 3 county judges, all Democrats, all helping to lead large, diverse communities who I think are the answer to what would Democrats do if they had a chance to lead or were in power. County Judge Ricardo Samaniego here in El Paso County. So city councils, school boards in some cases, county judges, I think they are the ones where the rubber meets the road when it comes to government, where they're going to have the greatest impact on just how government intersects with your life, whether your garbage got picked up, whether you have reliable, consistent early voting hours. All of that is decided ultimately by those local elected officials. And in so many instances, we can point to Democrats who are doing a great job. And I think if we can keep that up and expand access to the ballot where it's controlled at the local level, where we can continue to have competence in how your city or county or school board services are delivered, then we're going to continue to build faith with people and give them a reason to participate and be civically engaged and vote, and I hope run for office, and do that all at a time that democracy is being attacked from seemingly every direction. So those are some of the ways in which I find people, able to be hopeful about government and elections. It's probably where a lot of my hope is right now. And then, present company on this call, there are those not in positions of elected office who basically given their lives to making sure that our democracy works. And in the most voter suppressed state in the union, the hardest place to register and cast your ballot and ensure that it's counted, we're not giving up. And we're continuing to do the hard work that's necessary, not in an election year, and not because any of us are running for office, but because this is what we have to do in order to make it work. And we're doing it in 2021. So all that gives me hope. And I hope it gives others the faith that they need to believe that this thing can work, and then to take the action necessary to build that for others.
You set me up so perfectly for the thing I wanted to say next. Thanks, Beto. But what I think one of the things that resonated so much with certainly me, but everybody that I know was touched by your campaign for Senate, was that there was a new narrative introduced. in like the narrative of hope and possibility in Texas and the ability to see this thing, and to see where, you know, the spirit of our democracy was returned to the people. And I think that, so what we do on this podcast is we are trying to build the world for all of our children, trying to build the best world for all of our children, and empower the moms, the parents, the humans listening to this that that are on this journey with us. That like part of, and this is where I would love to hear you think about it, but I think part of it is an understanding and a belief that this belongs to us, and the entitlement to take it as ours and really own it. At least that's what keeps me fueled up and coming back to it, because I do feel like this country belongs to me. And I do feel like until every single kid has the educational opportunity that my kids have, like, I'm not done. We've got a lot of work to do, but we can do it. And I think that that ownership piece is what I want the people listening to feel. And I think it's sometimes hard to know where to plug in and what to do with that energy. Like, it's great conceptually, but you know, okay, so now what?
Yeah, you just you know, what you just said is a reminder to all of us that there are no sidelines in a democracy. It doesn't happen on its own. And I think because this country is so wealthy, and in some objective standards, measurable standards, it's been so successful. Although, to go back to RFK and remember his gross national product speech, where he says, look, it measures all the pollution that's belched out of our factories. It measures all of the, TV shows for our kids that set them up to want to buy the action figures. What it doesn't measure is everything that makes life worth living, right? And so, but there's been this this comfort at some level for some people, especially those in positions of privilege, right? For whom it has been working so well for them, and others who look like them or pray like them or love like them for so long. And on the other hand, there's been such a concerted effort for really ever since there's been in America to keep some people out of the opportunity for economic success or democratic participation. You know, if you really think about it, we've only been a democracy for about 56 years since the Voting Rights Act was passed. Prior to that, if you were Black, certainly if you lived in the South, including in Texas, you were not participating in our democracy. You were not running for office. You were not electing those who would serve in office. You were not represented in power. Since then, we know that segregation has been in our elections has been replaced with voter ID, racial gerrymandering, polling place closures, and other methods to keep certain people, especially Black Texans and Mexican American Texans and Texans in communities of color, from participating in the franchise. And so you have to see both of those, I think. I think the complacency, especially on the part of those in power, and then the very active effort to keep those not in power from ever touching it in the first place. And all of that has combined to produce a state that is 46th in voter turnout. So you're right, that's where we find ourselves. We can acknowledge all of these challenges, all of these opportunities, but for so long, so many have not participated. How the heck do we get into the game? And I think that, for many of us, it begins with, voting, which should never be assumed to be an easy thing. And for so many, that is such an intimidating step to take. And the more that we can be empathetic and non-judgmental and don't say this high horse stuff like, well, if you don't vote, you get what you deserve. But instead say, you know what, voting can be tough. And there are those who will try to make it really tough on you. Let me talk this through exactly what you're about to experience when you go into the ballot box. And let me help you understand some of the issues that are going to be decided, some of the candidates who are running. And there are organizations like Move, like Texas Organizing Project Top, that are organizing at people's doors in non-election years to bring people into civic conversations around the school board and around where the city dump is going to be placed in whose neighborhood, and your power to organize around that so that decision doesn't happen to you, so that you are contributing to how that decision is made, that this is your city. You have every much a right as anyone else to be at that city council hearing to determine where that dump is going to go. That's how I think we do it. These small steps that don't even have to be part of someone's campaign or an official organization, knocking on your neighbor's door, introducing yourself, saying, I know you're 65 years or over. Maybe you shouldn't say that to your neighbor, but if you are 65 years or older, hey, I want to make sure you get on this list to get a COVID vaccine. Just as a neighbor, just thought I'd come by and make sure that you're on that list. And then, by the way, are you registered to vote? No, why not? And listen to them, and they may have very legitimate reasons. Listen through those, and then maybe make a plan together to get registered or become a volunteer deputy registrar, as I did last year, and as I'm about to get certified to do again. I don't know. Then because there's all the other stuff you can do, right? Running for office, joining a campaign, the stuff all of us have been a part of. But I think these seemingly simple, very personal connections that we make with our neighbors can be incredibly profound and very powerful and long lasting. Long after the candidates left town, or the money's not being spent on the TV ads, or everyone's talking about something other than the next election. If you still have that relationship with that person, that in itself is a very democratic act, that we're all in some way each other's keeper, that we're mutually in this together. And whether it's an election or whether it's making sure that you get vaccinated, we're going to be there for one another. So those are some thoughts on how to meet this moment and be engaged, and try to be as compassionate and empathetic and non-judgmental as possible, even for those who may have voted for someone other than who you voted for president. It's easier said than done, but sure. That's something I find myself trying to do.
It sounds a whole lot like taking care of people.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Imagine a world where.
I'm listening to you talk and hearing your passion, whether it's on a personal, local, statewide level. I remember when you campaigned, you visited over 200 counties in Texas. You didn't just hit major cities, right? And the story you talked about in going to this restaurant in Goldthwaite, again, that you have this personal connection to all the folks here because you hit the road and not just calling these big donors. I gotta ask, we've been seeing the chatter on the news and this throwdown on Twitter with Abbott. Tell us more about this potential for a run for governor. What do you think? What does Mama Melissa think?
And don't feel like, we will be fine if you want to announce it on Three Righteous Mamas.
Okay, but I'm already ready.
I
got balloons. I got a
I'll
t-shirt.
go get my shirt on if you need.
The birthday was just a front.
Look, I was talking about the 2018 campaign earlier and how good it felt to be part of what all of us together were doing. I mean, I think before I ever decided for sure to run, although I think I knew in my head I was going to do it, I remember meeting Christina on the Capitol steps. She'd organized this amazing, massive rally, and we were talking about the Muslim ban. We were talking about what Trump wanted to do, and we knew he was going to try to do to immigrant families. And I felt so good being there because I felt connected with all these people I had never met. I didn't know Christina existed. And here she put together this amazing rally that was focusing the state's attention on this threat that was coming right at us. And, no political leader was necessarily doing that. No one, in office said, Christina, you got to do this. She just stepped up and brought us all together. And there just was, and, whether or not I ultimately became a candidate, that was a profound and transformational experience for me. Much the same way this last year, not as a candidate, not running a campaign with Powered by People, we were helping organize folks to register voters or to call voters or to knock on doors. And that felt really good as well. And I think even with the disappointing outcome in November of this year, great that Biden won and great that we have the Senate and the House, but Texas did not perform true to its true potential in my opinion. Even having said that, I think something from all these experiences has changed in me, where I'm no longer hanging on what happens on election night for a given candidate or campaign or office, but instead the work that we are all a part of. And so my very long answer to your question is, in whatever way I can be helpful, I'm in all the way. And whether that's organizing or running as a candidate or in some other capacity, I want to see this state come through. And I take a lot of inspiration from those who are on this call, who have lived their lives that way, from those that we probably mutually admire, like Stacey Abrams, who really kind of a 10-year project from 2011 to 2021, and the amazing people that she organized with. And very often, as a candidate and as an office holder, and then very often not as a candidate and an office holder. And so I really have to make sure that I'm doing what is best for all involved, and that might include not being a candidate, and so I just want to make sure that I'm thoughtful, and I'm fully part of the team that all of us are on in what I do. So I will spend some time in the future, at some point, thinking this through. Right now, I'm so lucky I get to teach this course at Texas State and another one at the LBJ School, one on Texas politics, the other on voting rights, and I've got my hands full doing that. So, that's the spirit, Martha, with which and Muna and Christina, with which I want to approach the decision, and just try to be good with whatever role, whatever role is best. I don't know. I know that's probably not a satisfying answer, but it's an honest one. And I just think I've learned so much from both the Senate race and then the presidential nomination race. And the former, the Senate race, was just so much about the people who came together to form that campaign. And I wanted so much to do that on the nomination race, and just given its national scale and scope and so many other factors, it never really came together in that same way, despite having extraordinary volunteers, amazing supporters, and a world-class team. So whatever I do, I just want to be part of an amazing people-powered effort. And one way or the other, I will. I
think we got a hell of a good team, all of us. No matter where we sit, no matter where we play, like we are a good team.
Absolutely. And I don't have any anxiety about it or any fear. I know there are so many good people committed to the cause that we're going to come through one way or another, with one candidate or another. That the person is less important than the cause for me right now.
Well, thank you so much for giving us your hour, your time away from babies, reading all those books you have to read behind you. I mean, so thank you.
I got to get started.
It's like a lot of I'm supposed to teach a class.
Right.
But thank you for giving us your hour and time. We know you're really busy and could be doing a million other things. So thank you.
It's an honor to be with you all.
Will you give your sister the world's biggest hug for me?
You got it. Absolutely. And Charlotte says hello to you. She's excited that we're talking today. It's good to see you all. And I cannot wait until we're all vaccinated and mobile again and able to see each other in person. But until then, please be safe and stay well. And just know that I'm grateful for what you're doing right now, and grateful for what we're all going to do over the coming years. It's going to be good.
I love having Beto. The way that I met him is that his sister is one of my very best friends from forever ago at camp. We went to camp together 30 years ago. And so when he was considering running, Charlotte called and was like, hey, I want you to meet my brother. And so I did. And the very first thing that he said that really I felt this huge relief, because I feel like it is so rarely talked about in elected politics, was when he talked about not taking special interest money. And I think from what I had seen it do in my own experience in DC, and just it corrupts the ability of the people of the people who are meant to govern to truly govern for the people. And so hearing him talk about it really made me feel a certain way of hopefulness that I hadn't felt in a long time in Texas. And I think getting to come full circle and talk to him today about it was really cathartic, because once I identified that was really my beef with everything political, because you can pull all issues back down into it. I pull food back into it all of the time, but our food system is corrupt because it delivers profit from disease instead of health. Disease is profitable. Health is not in our current structure. And Christina and I have talked some about these books that we have read. Dark Money by Jane Mayer is my favorite. So if you want to get a real understanding of how and why this has happened in our democracy, I cannot recommend a book more than Dark Money by Jane Mayer. It is riveting if you are a government nerd, which I happen to be. There are two other books that are really wonderful too. The System by Robert Reich. I'm not going to say his name right, because I never say his name right, and I didn't just then. And then Democracy in Chains is one that I've heard a lot about but have not yet read, by Nancy MacLean. So those are my recommendations for how to understand more deeply where this comes from, because I think that really helps me. I know it doesn't help everybody, but it helps me to know where we've been in order to build our way out of it.
Yeah, super important. I was also very moved at, as y'all heard me talking about, I had an attachment to Beto when he ran. And I think for the first time in my life, got involved in politics in a way, because I held on to hope for my own family, for having a leader that could see us and respect our humanity, not just for the Muslim community, but several underrepresented groups. That event Beto was talking about with Christina, I remember he spoke in fluent Spanish at that event when he gave his speech, and I was in tears, because there's something about when someone talks to you in your own language, in your own culture, if you will, and has enough presence to do that when other folks are making statements like, Mexico is sending their worst, they're sending rapists, right? And here's someone who's recognizing you. I just remember being in tears and feeling that hope. So I hear you, Martha, 100%. As I had so many Beto t-shirts, like my baby could recognize, Beto. I don't know if it was just the logo or not, but such a good reminder of what Beto was talking about, is our role as parents to involve our children in what we're doing, so they build an understanding and they grow up being part of the system, and that they grow up being active, right? Whether it is helping a neighbor be informed and learn about a vaccine, or going to speak at a council meeting, you don't have to dedicate your whole life, right? We all have our own things we need to do, but there are ways to get involved and to be doing that with our littles, not just like, okay, I'm leaving my kid with a babysitter. Like there is so much value in just bringing your kids along. Like that event, Christina, I remember you had Santi with you. He had just been born and you had him with you.
Old, and I was breastfeeding like in around the corner, hidden with like a blanket over me. In between like emceeing, I'd be like, Muna, I'll be right back. You hold that thought. You've got this. I got it.
I remember that. And like, I left my kid at home because there was no way. I think my son was about a year old at that time. And I left him at home with my husband, but like both of my kids have gone with me to events and knocking on doors. And, you know, my little was in a stroller when I went knocking on doors, actually with my neighbor, we went and did it too. So like, getting involved with our kids, super important for them to have agency and see what it means to do that. And you know, hopefully not be in a position like me where I was like, oh, I think I'm, you know, in my 40s, I should start getting involved. And by the way, it's fine. Like get on the train, no matter where you are, at what point in your life, get on the train, just make forward progress.
There's no such thing as too late.
Yeah, I feel like Santi was banging on the door to get in here because he wanted to be part of this riveting conversation. So clearly it appeals to people of all ages. But I actually do think that the vast majority of Americans are outraged, absolutely outraged by how we currently finance and elect candidates of all political persuasions, because people aren't seeing the outcomes in their lives. And they're not seeing the outcomes in their lives because people are worried about what donors think. And there are some, you know, I don't think being wealthy makes you an evil or bad person. It just makes your perspective and your needs very different than the vast majority of Americans. You know, here in the United States, 40% of Americans make under $15 an hour, 40% of Americans. And so, yeah, you have some people that finance candidates. None of them have any idea what it's like to live that way. And so that's how you get a stalemate where overwhelmingly, I think the numbers like 85% of Americans support raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and yet it doesn't move. It's like how we get to the fact that people want very common sense gun reform, and with almost universal, like 90% support on basic things like universal background checks, and then Congress doesn't move. And so democracy has always been this really radical idea because it's the great equalizer, right? All of our votes are supposed to be equal in weight, equal in representation, regardless of where we come from, you know, once we're naturalized citizens, but regardless of the color of our skin, regardless of our gender, regardless of religion, creed. And it doesn't really feel that way when ultimately your elected official or many elected officials are then not delivering the will of the people in policy. And ultimately, you know, when I ran for Senate, people would be like, what's the number one thing you want to do when you get to Washington? And I said, ultimately, there's a lot of things that need fixed. But until we fix how we care for our democracy and invest in it and defend it, and how we finance candidates, we're not going to be able to fix the major issues that we care about, at least to the level that's needed. So that's my number one issue. And I believe it's most Americans' number one issue. So Demos released this number. The last thing I wanted to say is that Demos released this number that a few years back, it's the most up-to-date number, that today 79% of Americans believe that government is run by a few big interests just looking out for themselves. And while someone might say, oh, that's not surprising, back in 1964, just 29% of Americans believe that. That's a huge shift. And it's a huge shift because we've gone even deeper in allowing very, very wealthy people to decide who our elected officials are. And we've got to change it because we've got to change it for these little people that we all love. We've got to change it for their futures. because everything hinges on it, everything.